On today's video, we're here to discuss the Atrius Development Super Selector Forced Reset Safety. Now, for those of you in the know, when you see a safety selector in this position, you know a good time is about to be had. However, for those of you who see this and think, I think he might have put that on backwards, boy howdy, do we have a video for you. For many of us, when we see a safety selector that allows you to move not just to the semi-auto position, but further forward into the coveted third position, we refer to this as the fun switch. Now, despite the similarities that this may have to a rifle that is fully auto capable, I want to make it very clear. This is not a machine gun, nor does this part allow this gun to perform machine gun activities. Now, that's very important, and with that being said,
the content in this video features a non-NFA fully legal product that does not replicate nor simulate automatic fire, and as such is 100% compliant with YouTube's terms of service. Once again, this is not a machine gun nor a machine gun adjacent product. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Now that that's out of the way, I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into what makes a forced reset product what it is. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, essentially what happens is when you pull the trigger, the device is forcibly pushing the trigger forward every time a round cycles. That's going to allow a much higher rate of fire than if you were just manually manipulating the trigger. Because let's face it, your finger dexterity sucks. Now that we're up to speed on the general functionality of this product, we're going to head up to the workbench and go over the components required in order to make this run in your rifle. Because unfortunately, this isn't a plug-and-play product, so there are some key factors to be considered if you want this product to run effectively, or at all for that matter. So as I mentioned, there's several things you have to have in order for your super selector to work, one of which is an M16 style lower, or at least a lower that has what they call a low shelf. This is your shelf area right here, and as you can see, a low shelf comes and it matches up flush with where your selector slot is. Let you try to see that a little bit better there. If you had a high shelf lower, it would actually come up to here, right beneath where your takedown pin sits, and it would not allow your super selector to work. Here we have a side-by-side comparison of a semi-auto bolt carrier group versus a fully auto bolt carrier group. The main difference you're going to notice is right here in this area. With the full auto bolt carrier group, the profile is much longer, whereas the semi-auto has quite a bit of a relief cutout. Now that's important because that trip lever is going to catch right in here in order to reset. That said, if you have a bolt carrier that looks like this, it's not going to work. Another thing I wanted to mention, because it was something that drove me crazy when I was initially researching what products would or wouldn't work with this device, and that's going to be what they refer to when they say the rear part of the trigger has to be flat. So this is the lower half, the trigger portion of a mil-spec trigger, and this is the orientation it would be in if it were sitting in the lower. So what they're referring to is the portion back here that sits behind the disconnector spring. This right here has to be flat. So if it's not flush and you have a little U-notch right there, the trigger will not work. The last component I want to discuss is the buffer itself. As per Atrius's suggestion, you're going to want a free-moving buffer weight. And if you don't know what that is, it's exactly what it sounds like. The weight inside the buffer slides back and forth within the cylinder as it travels with the bolt. That just gives you that law of motion. So when that weight slides forward, you have a lot of force going towards the back of your bolt carrier, and that will ensure not only a good lockup on your breech, but help avoid bolt bounce. Now that's a really big issue, not just for safety concerns, but when you're dealing with that high rate of fire, you also have a tendency to get light primer strikes, which is another reason that I actually suggest going with an H3 weight. Now that seems a little heavy for most AR-15 applications, but again, with a high rate of fire and just ensuring that you get less of those light primer strikes and pretty much mitigate bolt bounce altogether, I suggest going with the H3. I did test an H2 buffer. I did have light primer strikes. As soon as I put the H3 in, that pretty much resolved that issue. So as you can see, we got that shit on today, as the kids would say. That's right, we're going full LARP mode for this one, which means additional weight, poor shouldering, and excessive sweating. All for the love of the game. But you know what they say, that's showbiz, baby. But realistically, I can store a ton of mags, which, safe to say, we're going to need for this one. Alright, now the moment a lot of you probably came here for, also known as the cure to male loneliness, also known as a huge waste of money. The
YouTube compliant capacity
mag dump. So as you see here, I've yet to pick up the ambi version of the Super Selector, which I will be doing when they get back in stock. However, for the time being, it does pose a slight issue when I'm shouldering and going from semi into the forced reset position because my thumb just won't allow me to roll that far forward. So I've got to kind of come off shouldering, cant the rifle, flip her in, and then get back on target, which is exactly what we're going to simulate with this next drill. We're going to fire one shot out to 100 yards in semi-automatic, roll forward into the forced reset, and do a 5-round burst on this guy up front. So not too difficult, but again, it does take you off target a bit when you're transitioning between the two. Outside of the couple clips that I released leading up to this video as kind of teaser trailers, this is my first day running the Super Selector. So everything you're seeing is first takes, first experiences, and in fact, prior to this, I have had no experience with FRTs, super safeties, anything of the like. So this is all fresh, straight off the muscle. You're seeing it as I'm doing it for the first time. That being said, one thing I have yet to do, or test I should say, is fire in a burst manner where I'm leaving the magazine loaded and just firing like a 2-round burst, etc. So we're going to give that a shot and see how possible it is. Actually not hard at all, and I think a lot of that has to do with how I have this thing dialed. I have a pretty moderate rate of fire, and by moderate I mean it's still fast as hell, but very controllable, and I think a lot of that really comes down to that H3 buffer weight. So if you want something really reliable, really smooth, and really controllable while also being able to run it pretty hard, I really do suggest that H3 buffer weight. So something else I should mention outside the rifle itself is what we fed into it. All of the shooting you saw today is with this MagTech Tactical, just 5.56 ball ammo, but I love MagTech. It's what I use on the range for everything from 9mm, 5.56, and 300 Blackout. As far as magazines, I brought out everything from Lancer to ETS and even a Mend 2. And actually, as much hate as a Mend 2 does get, I do run these as range magazines so I can kind of tear them up without having to waste money, and I don't really have a lot of problems with them. And that being said, I didn't really have any issues with any of these. Now, of course, Magpul run like a dream because they're the top tier, so I didn't even mention them in this lineup. That's just kind of expected. But yeah, surprisingly, as far as the different brands go, I didn't really see any hiccups. And even when I did have some issues here or there, I can't really blame the magazine, or if it was my trigger pull or something else. So just food for thought for you guys out there. One thing I've been doing periodically after I run this guy hard is kind of just checking for signs of wear on that throw lever, seeing if there's any nicks or any kind of marring whatsoever. I'm also checking up in this top area of the bolt carrier where it would also touch. Fortunately, so far, I've had absolutely no signs of wear, so perhaps I've just got the golden ratio as far as the setup, but I do advise you guys doing that as well. That'll help you avoid a broken lever. I'm sure a lot of you were waiting for something to go wrong during this video, and not to let you down entirely, but the Super Selector ran like a top. However, I do have some bad news for all of you Die-Free Co. Kung Fu grip lovers like myself. The Super Selector absolutely hates the grip plug. This guy has fallen out no less than 20 times during the filming of this video. So, I hate to say it, boys, but probably going to have to tape this guy on the bottom. Rattle can double tap. This is completely pointless. But still fun. So in conclusion, what do I think about the Atreus Super Selector? Quite frankly, it's badass. Now, that goes without saying for most of us, but there are a few key reasons that brought me to this conclusion. The first of which being obviously the joy it brought me to run this product. If you need further clarification, feel free to rewatch this video. Secondly is despite the fact that I saw a lot of folks who came before me struggle with malfunctions, failures to feed, or even levers breaking, it's probably due to their struggles I was able to skirt around all that and get this thing up and running flawlessly in no time at all. So thank you to everyone that did come before me, because it's your struggles that helped me avoid all of them. And last is this surprising one for me, and that's practicality. When I purchased this, I assumed this would just be a range toy where I'm just ripping shots and enjoying the freedom of being an American. However, after running it today, there's a lot of practical use, and I think in the right hands, you can really put this thing to work in ways that I personally never even thought of before. So, all things considered, very much worth the $200 that I spent. I'd like to thank Atreus Development for putting out such a rad product and pushing the boundaries of our 2A capabilities. And as always, everyone for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. Let's help continue to grow this channel. And cheers and God bless.
Like and subscribe if making it go BRRRRT makes you smile.